My name is Brielle Reeves. I'm 27 years old, and my older sister scrapped the one thing I had spent 11 years building with my own hands because she decided it made our family look cheap. That sentence still sounds unreal when I say it out loud. Too dramatic, too ugly, too specific in a way that makes people think there has to be more to it. Like maybe I'm leaving something out. Like maybe I'm the difficult one. Maybe I provoked her. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding over an old car sitting in a garage too long. That's how families like mine survive, by the way. Not through honesty, through editing, through cleaning up the story until the person who got hurt starts sounding unstable for bleeding all over the polished version. So before I get to what she did and what I did after, you need to understand what that car actually was. I work as a service coordinator for a commercial HVAC company in Kansas City, which is a clean way of saying I spend most of my life dispatching technicians, chasing parts that should have arrived 3 days ago, calming down furious building managers, and listening to grown adults describe a dead air handler like it's a hostage situation. It pays the bills, mostly. I've got student loans from a degree I barely use, and 2 years ago, I went through a stretch bad enough that I still feel it in my chest whenever I check my bank balance for too long. My company downsized. I spent 6 months bouncing between temp work, gig jobs, and the kind of humiliating little survival math nobody talks about unless they've lived it. Which bill could slide? What groceries could stretch? How long I could pretend I wasn't scared? So I'm disciplined now. I don't buy what I can't afford. I drive a 2009 Corolla with 187,000 miles on it because it starts every morning, and these days I respect anything that does what it promises. The Nova was different. The Nova wasn't practical. It wasn't responsible. It definitely wasn't financially smart. But it was mine in the deepest way something can be yours when you didn't buy it with excess money. You bought it with time, with restraint, with years of saying no to easier things. My Uncle Dale is my mother's younger brother. In my family, that automatically makes him suspicious. He skipped college, never chased some title that looked good on Christmas cards, and spent his whole life working in shops around the city, fixing other people's engines, transmissions, bad decisions, and breakdowns. The family calls him the black sheep. I call him the only adult who ever taught me anything useful. He taught me how to bleed brakes without trapping air in the lines, how to set timing with a cheap Harbor Freight timing light while watching the marks on the harmonic balancer and listening for that perfect moment when the engine stopped fighting itself. How to torque head bolts in a star pattern so you didn't warp the heads and spend the next 6 months hating yourself. When I was 16, I bought a rusted-out 1973 Nova 2-door base model for $1,800 cash. I still remember the way everybody reacted. My mother looked personally offended. My father asked if I had lost my mind. My sister Savannah laughed and asked if I was planning to live in it. Only Uncle Dale walked around it twice, crouched near the frame rails with a flashlight, kicked one tire, then looked at me and said, "We can work with this." That was 11 years ago. The Nova stayed in my parents' garage because my duplex doesn't allow wrenching, and because I needed Dale's tools, his space, and honestly, his patience. Over the years, we rebuilt it in phases. Cash only. Always. If I didn't have the money, the car waited. No debt, no fantasies, no pretending. I tracked down the correct rally wheels at a swap meet in Topeka after 8 months of searching and calling every listing within 300 miles. Dale and I rebuilt the 350 small block over 3 long weekends, from pulling the heads to checking bearing clearances. We refreshed the suspension with new bushings and shocks. We rebuilt the brakes with new rotors, calipers, and shoes all around. I reupholstered the interior with clearance material from a shop that was going out of business. It was never a show car. It was never going to be some 6-figure auction darling. On paper, it probably didn't look like much. But on paper, people like my sister look better than they are too. My family runs on appearances. That's the real engine in that house. My parents live in a subdivision in Lee's Summit in a home they can barely afford, surrounded by people with financed SUVs, perfect lawns, and credit card debt nobody mentions over neighborhood cookouts. The grass always looks immaculate because everybody is terrified of becoming the house people whisper about. My mother works medical billing for a hospital network. My father manages a tire shop on the south side. Together they probably make decent money. But they spend like they make double because image matters more in my family than peace. And then there's Savannah. She's 31, works in pharmaceutical sales, and has spent her whole adult life curating the role of successful daughter like it's a full-time performance review. Perfect hair that probably cost $200 a month to maintain. Perfect apartment in Overland Park with catalog furniture. Perfect leased Lexus she complains about because of the mileage limits. Everything about Savannah is arranged to suggest a life about 3 tax brackets above the truth. The thing is, she didn't invent that hunger. My parents installed it in her young. How you look, how you sound, what people think when they see you. By the time Savannah was 12, image had stopped being a lesson and become a religion. So when she got engaged to Grant Whitmore, my parents acted like she'd married into royalty. Grant came from old Kansas City money, the kind that doesn't need to brag because everybody in the right zip codes already knows the name. His family owned commercial real estate downtown and around the plaza. His mother sat on charity boards that required both a dress code and a donation floor. They lived in Mission Hills in a house with white columns out front like they were auditioning for a movie about rich people whose problems are all upholstered. Grant himself was fine, polite in that highly trained way, where you can tell someone taught him exactly how to speak at dinner parties without ever actually saying anything real. Never rude to your face. Never warm enough to trust either. The engagement dinner was downtown at one of those restaurants where the menu doesn't list prices because if you need to ask, you shouldn't be there. I showed up in clean jeans and a navy button-down because that was the nicest casual outfit I owned, and Savannah's instructions had been vague enough to be useless. The second I walked in, her eyes scanned me from head to toe. The jeans, the shoes, my haircut, everything got cataloged in that one look. Then I saw her lean toward Grant's mother and whisper something while gesturing just slightly in my direction. I pretended not to notice. Dinner itself was expensive and exhausting. There were cocktails with herbs floating in them, conversations about wedding venues and honeymoon villas in Italy, and endless discussions about real estate, guest counts, family expectations, and floral aesthetics like any of it was oxygen. Grant's mother ran the table like a board meeting. His father dropped occasional comments that everyone received as if carved on stone tablets. Grant timed his smile and his nods like part of a polished routine. And Savannah, Savannah performed. She laughed too hard at jokes that weren't funny. Mirrored Grant's mother's posture like she'd studied it in advance. Agreed with opinions I'd never once heard come out of her actual mouth. I mostly stayed quiet, ate my steak, observed the room. That's one thing unemployment and family dysfunction will teach you. If you can't control the table, learn to read it. Then Savannah decided to explain me. For context, for the benefit of the Whitmores. Brielle's our little grease monkey, she said with a bright, practiced laugh. She's been working on some old junker in Mom and Dad's garage for years. It's her hobby. Grant's mother lifted one eyebrow. Oh? What kind of car? A 73 Nova, I said. Savannah smiled quickly, before the answer could become interesting. She bought it as a teenager, she added. It's very rustic. Kind of one of those never-ending projects, you know? Rustic. The way she said it made the real meaning obvious. Not charming. Not vintage. Trashy. Embarrassing. I let it pass because I wasn't there to fight. I was there to eat free food, survive the evening, and do what families like mine always expect from the least convenient member. Be quiet enough to be tolerated. Then something unexpected happened. Grant's father looked at me with actual interest. Classic American muscle, he said. Those old Novas can be worth quite a bit if they're done right. A friend of mine had one in college. Mean little thing. For one brief second, I felt seen. Not judged. Not managed. Just seen. Then Savannah cut across him before the moment could breathe. Oh, Brielle's isn't anything like that, she said lightly. It's been sitting in my parents' garage forever, taking up space. Honestly, it's kind of an eyesore. The neighbors have complained. That was a lie. A flat, stupid, unnecessary lie. The car sat inside a closed garage. No neighbor had ever seen enough of it to complain. But truth didn't matter to Savannah if a better social version was available. I looked down at my plate, finished my steak, made small talk about nothing, and drove home in my Corolla afterward with both hands tight on the wheel, telling myself it didn't matter. That this was normal. That Savannah had always been like this. That I was too old to still be hurt by the same cuts, just because she'd learned how to deliver them in public with lipstick on. But the truth? It did matter. Because there's a difference between being disliked in your family and being used. And that night, sitting in my apartment with the overhead light off and the sound of traffic outside my window, I had the first quiet, ugly thought that maybe Savannah didn't just look down on the Nova. Maybe she resented the fact that I had built something real with my hands, while she was still borrowing every inch of herself from the people she wanted to impress. I didn't know yet how far that resentment would go. I only knew something had shifted. Something small, something dangerous, and once it started, it didn't stop. The night she stopped playing small, over the next 2 months, Savannah didn't let that dinner go. Not directly. That would have required honesty. Instead, she did what she always did. She refined it, controlled it, managed it. Every family gathering suddenly came with instructions. Text the morning of. Subtle at first. Hey, maybe go a little more dressed up tonight. Grant's parents might stop by. Then less subtle. Please don't bring up the car, it just confuses people. And eventually, not subtle at all. I need you to be normal tonight, Brielle. This matters. Be normal. Like everything about me that wasn't curated for someone else's approval was some kind of defect she needed to hide. She started pulling me aside at events too. Little corrections whispered behind closed doors or in hallways while everyone else laughed in the next room. Don't talk about work like that, it sounds chaotic. Maybe don't mention Uncle Dale. People don't really get that kind of lifestyle. Try to be a little more polished. Polished. Like I was a scuffed surface she could buff out if she worked hard enough. And my parents? They went along with all of it. Because nothing was allowed to disrupt the wedding. Grant's family was paying for half. Half. That number echoed in my parents' heads like a lifeline. Grant's mother had opinions about everything. The venue, the guest list, the caterer, the flowers, the band, the napkin colors. And my parents nodded through every suggestion like it was a gift instead of a bill they were quietly panicking about behind closed doors. They were so desperate to appear like equals that they agreed to things they couldn't afford, smiling through stress like it was part of the performance. And I was part of that performance too, just not in a role I'd chosen. Uncle Dale noticed it the next time he came over. It was a Saturday in early October, the kind of day where the air finally cooled off enough that working in a garage didn't feel like punishment. The Nova was close, closer than it had ever been. We'd finally gotten the exhaust right after 2 failed attempts. When it idled, it had this low, steady rumble, not obnoxious, not showy, just confident, like it knew exactly what it was. Dale leaned over the engine bay, listening for a moment, then glanced at me. Your sister still giving you trouble? I tightened a bolt a little harder than I needed to. She wants me to be someone else for this wedding. He didn't look surprised. Dress different, talk different, don't mention the car, don't mention you. That last part slipped out before I could stop it. Dale straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. She say that? Not in those words. He gave a small knowing nod. Doesn't have to. I leaned back against the workbench, staring at the Nova. They act like it's embarrassing. Dale looked at the car, then back at me. Ain't nothing embarrassing about building something with your own hands. I let out a quiet breath. Doesn't seem to matter to them. He shrugged. Your sister's been performing since she was 12. Don't get dragged into her show. I nodded. I meant it when I said it. I really did. I didn't plan to play along any more than I had to. But Savannah? Savannah had already decided how this was going to go. The rehearsal dinner was 2 weeks later, at Grant's parents' house in Mission Hills. Calling it a house felt wrong. It was a property. The kind of place where the landscaping looked like it had a full-time staff, which it probably did, and the driveway curved just enough to make arriving feel like an event. White columns out front, marble floors inside, artwork that looked expensive enough to require insurance. I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment before leaving, adjusting the sleeves of a sport coat I had bought specifically for this night. I didn't own anything like it before. Didn't need to. But Savannah had sent 3 increasingly aggressive messages about the dress code, about making a good impression, about how families like Grant's didn't forget first impressions. So I tried. I really tried. Slacks, button down, sport coat, shoes that made my feet hurt after an hour. I looked like someone I didn't quite recognize, but I showed up anyway. Because part of me still believed if I just cooperated enough, we could get through this without things getting worse. That was my mistake. The night itself started fine. Too many people. Too much money in one room. Too many conversations that sounded important but meant nothing. I stayed on the edges. Answered when spoken to. Kept things neutral. Safe. And for a while it worked. Then I made the mistake of relaxing. Grant's college roommate, Brett, found me near the bar. He was one of the only people there who didn't feel like he'd been assembled for the occasion. He asked what I did for fun outside of work. Simple question. Normal question. I hesitated for half a second. Then I said it. Cars. His face lit up a little. What kind? And just like that, I was talking. About the Nova. About the years. About rebuilding the small block. About the satisfaction of bringing something back piece by piece instead of buying it finished. It wasn't a performance. It was just me. And he was actually listening. Asking questions. Engaging. For maybe the first time in that entire world, I wasn't being managed or minimized. I was just part of a conversation. Then Savannah appeared. Not walked over. Not approached. appeared, like she'd been tracking the conversation from across the room and couldn't let it continue. Brielle's so funny about that old car, she said, sliding between us with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's been her little project forever. Her hand landed lightly on my arm. Possessive. Performative. Very practical. She laughed. That fake, controlled laugh. The one that tells everyone else this is a joke without actually saying anything funny. Brett shifted, clearly uncomfortable. I felt the heat rise in my face, but she wasn't done. We love her anyway, Savannah added lightly. Anyway, like I was something to tolerate, not respect. Why don't you go grab another drink, Brielle? She said, still smiling. Let the adults talk about something else. 11 years. 11 years of work. 11 years of being reduced to a punchline in her story. And something in me just stopped. Not exploded. Not snapped. Stopped. The part of me that kept trying to make it easier for her. The part that kept absorbing it. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the perfect hair. The perfect posture. The perfect smile that depended entirely on everyone else playing their assigned roles. And I said calmly, at least my Corolla's paid off. The smile flickered. Just a fraction. How's that lease treating you? Silence. It didn't spread slowly. It dropped. Like a glass shattering in a quiet room. Conversations nearby cut off mid-sentence. People turned. Not obviously, but enough. Savannah's hand slipped off my arm like I'd burned her. Her face went white. Not embarrassed. Not annoyed. Panicked. Because I hadn't just pushed back. I had broken the script. I didn't wait for her to recover. Didn't wait for damage control. Didn't stay to watch her rebuild the moment. I turned. Walked out. Past the marble floors. Past the open doors. Past the line of cars parked like a showroom outside. I could hear her calling my name behind me. Sharp. Controlled. Urgent. I didn't turn around. I got into my Corolla. Closed the door. Sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel. Then I drove. I didn't go anywhere specific. Just away. By the time I got back to my apartment, the adrenaline had burned off. What was left behind wasn't victory. It was something heavier. Something complicated. Like I'd finally said what needed to be said, but too late to matter, or maybe too early to understand the cost. 4 days. That's how long the silence lasted after that. No calls. No texts. No passive-aggressive posts. Nothing. At first, I thought they were just processing it. That we'd have the usual awkward conversation, smooth it over, pretend it didn't happen. That was the pattern, after all. That had always been the pattern. I didn't realize yet that Savannah had already decided how to respond. And she wasn't interested in words. The empty garage. Saturday morning felt normal. That was the first strange thing. After 4 days of silence, I woke up expecting tension. A text. A call. Something. There was nothing. Just sunlight through my blinds, the low hum of traffic outside, and the quiet, steady thought sitting in the back of my mind. Today's the day. Dale and I had planned it all week. Finish the wiring cleanup behind the dash. Double-check everything. Then take the Nova out. Not around the block. Not just idling in this driveway. A real drive. Back roads south of the city. The first time in 11 years, that car would actually move under its own power because of everything we'd done. I grabbed coffee, threw on an old hoodie, and drove to my parents' house. My hands were already a little restless on the wheel. Not anxious. Excited. That kind of nervous energy you get right before something you've waited a long time for finally happens. I pulled into the driveway and paused. The garage door was closed. That wasn't normal. Dad usually left it cracked open when he knew I was coming over to work. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he ran out. Maybe I walked up the side of the house, let myself in through the door like I'd done 100 times before, and headed straight toward the garage. I didn't think, didn't prepare, didn't brace. I just opened the door and stopped. For a second, my brain didn't register what I was looking at. It tried to correct it, fill in the missing shape, like a glitch. Like the Nova had to be there, and my eyes were just off. But it wasn't. The space where it had sat for 11 years was empty, not moved, not shifted, empty. All that was left were dark oil stains on the concrete. The jack stands pushed against the wall. A couple of shop rags in the corner. The tool chest Dale had given me, and nothing else. I took a step forward. Then another. Like maybe if I got closer it would come back. Like it had just rolled somewhere else in the garage. Which didn't make any sense. But neither did this. I walked around the empty space like an idiot. Checked behind the lawnmower. Looked into corners. Like a full car could hide if I just didn't look at the right angle yet. My chest started to tighten. My hands went cold. I walked back outside. Checked the driveway. Walked around the house. Checked the backyard. Came back into the garage. Stood in the same empty spot again. Still gone. My heart was pounding now. Hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I pulled my phone out. Called Dad. No answer. Called Mom. No answer. Called Savannah. Straight to voicemail. Not even a ring. Blocked. That's when something cold slid into place in my stomach. Not panic. Not confusion. Recognition. I started pacing. Back and forth across the garage. My footsteps echoing in a space that suddenly felt way too big. Way too quiet. My phone rang. Mom. I answered immediately. Brielle, calm down. Where's my car? Silence. Just breathing on the other end. Then, Savannah had it removed. The words didn't make sense. Removed where? She said it was embarrassing, Mom said, her voice already trembling. Having it there when Grant's family came over for wedding planning, it was taking up space. Removed where? I don't know exactly, she said quickly. She arranged a tow truck, Tuesday morning. She said she was taking it somewhere more appropriate. Tuesday. The morning after the rehearsal dinner. After I walked out. After I said what I said. My grip tightened on the phone. Mom, I said slowly, carefully, because I could feel something dangerous building in my chest. The title. Where's the title? Silence again. Longer this time. Mom. It was in the filing cabinet, she whispered. Of course it was. Where it had always been. Since I was 16, since they said they'd keep it safe. Savannah took it, she added, barely audible. Something in me snapped into clarity. Not rage. Not yet. Clarity. She sold it. I don't. She sold it, I repeated, because there was no other reason. No other outcome. You don't take a car, the title, and a tow truck, unless you're planning to get rid of it. I hung up. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't wait for excuses. I called Dale. He picked up on the second ring. Yeah? The Nova's gone. Pause. Then, sharper. What? Savannah took it. She has the title. Another pause. Shorter this time. I'm on my way. He was there in 20 minutes. Old F-150 pulling into the driveway like it had somewhere to be. I was still standing in the garage, in the same spot, staring at the space like it might explain itself if I gave it enough time. Dale walked in, looked around once. Didn't say anything stupid. Didn't say calm down. Didn't say we'll figure it out. He just stared at the empty space, and I saw his jaw tighten. That was enough. What do we do? I asked. He turned to me. We find out where it went. How? Tow companies, salvage yards, scrap yards, every one of them within 30 miles. He was already moving, pulling out his phone, grabbing a pen. Sit down, he said, nodding toward the kitchen. We're doing this methodical. We sat at my parents' kitchen table for 4 hours. Phones, laptop, a legal pad covered in names and numbers. Dale took the Kansas side. I took Missouri. We called everyone, every tow company, every junkyard, every salvage operation we could find. Left voicemails when nobody answered. Took notes when they did. Most had nothing. Some didn't pick up. Some hung up fast. A few checked their logs and came back with nothing useful. Every no made it worse. Made the empty space feel more permanent. By hour 3, my voice was raw. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My brain kept running ahead of me. It's gone. It's already crushed. It's in pieces. You're too late. Then, one call changed everything. Hawthorne's Auto Salvage, a man answered. I forced my voice steady. Do you have a record of a 1973 Nova coming in this week? Pause. Yeah, he said, 4 days ago. My heart slammed. A woman brought it in, said it was a family car they wanted scrapped for parts. Savannah. Did she have paperwork? Title? Bill of sale? ID? Everything matched. We paid her $600 cash. $600. 11 years. Reduced to $600. I swallowed hard. Is it still there? Parts of it, he said. Drivetrain's already gone. Engine and transmission sold yesterday. Wheels went this morning. Body's still here, though. My stomach dropped. What about crushing? Scheduled Thursday afternoon. Thursday. Less than a week. Don't touch it, I said, my voice shaking despite everything. I'm coming. It doesn't work like that, he replied flatly. We bought it legal. You want to dispute it? Bring cops. Bring paperwork. I hung up. Looked at Dale. They've already taken it apart. He didn't react. Just nodded once. Then we don't waste time. He grabbed his keys. I'll drive. I didn't argue. My hands weren't steady enough to hold a steering wheel. We got in his truck, and for the first time since I walked into that empty garage, the panic turned into something else, something sharper, something colder, because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't Savannah being dramatic. This wasn't family tension. This was deliberate, planned, executed. She waited until the next morning, arranged the tow, took the paperwork, drove it across town, signed documents, took cash. 4 days. That's all it took her to erase 11 years. And as Dale pulled onto the road toward Raytown, one thought settled in, steady and clear. She didn't just want to embarrass me, she wanted to erase me. And she almost did. She turned her sister's panic into evidence. Hawthorne's auto salvage looked exactly like the kind of place where things disappeared. Chain link fence, razor wire, stacks of crushed cars pressed into metal cubes along one side like gravestones, rows of half-dismantled vehicles stretching toward a line of trees in the back. The air smelled like oil, rust, and heat-baked rubber. Dale parked the truck. I was already reaching for the door. He caught my arm. Hard. Brielle. I looked at him. You go in there swinging, he said quietly. You're the criminal, and your car gets crushed while you're sitting in a holding cell. You understand me? My jaw was tight enough to hurt, but I nodded. He let go. We walked in together. The office was a double-wide trailer with a hand-painted sign that said, Office, Ring Bell, and another underneath that said, No checks. A man in his 50s stood behind the counter. Greasy ball cap, forearms like steel cables. He looked at me once and said, You're the sister she mentioned? I'm the owner, I said. That's my car. He didn't argue. Didn't agree either. Just pulled a manila folder from behind the counter and dropped it in front of us. Opened it. Title transfer, he said, tapping the paper. Signed by Brielle Reeves. My stomach dropped. Bill of sale, same day, VIN matches. Another page. Tow authorization, Allied Towing. Another. Photocopy of her ID. Name matches the seller acting on behalf of the title holder. He flipped to the last page. 600 cash, receipt signed. I stared at the signature. It wasn't mine. Not even close. The shape was wrong. The pressure was wrong. The spacing was wrong. It looked like someone had tried to copy my name from memory and didn't care enough to get it right. That's forged, I said, my voice steady now in a way that surprised even me. That's not my signature. He shrugged. Could be, could not be. I'm not a handwriting expert. We check the boxes. Title signed. ID matches. VIN matches. We process it. You bought stolen property. I bought a car with paperwork that passed intake. His tone didn't change. Didn't need to. You got a problem with that. You bring cops. Bring a court order. Bring something that carries weight. Dale stepped forward slightly. Calm. Controlled. What would it take to hold it? He asked. Stop the crushing. No more parts pulled. Just hold it in place until this gets sorted. The man looked at him. Then at me. Then back at the folder. 200 cash, he said finally. Non-refundable. Gets you 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was nothing. But it was everything. After that, he continued, I need a detective calling me or a court order, otherwise it goes back in the queue. I didn't even think. Done. I had just under 300 in my account. Didn't matter. I pulled the cash. Handed it over. He wrote out a receipt. Marked something in a logbook. Row 7, he said. Nobody touches it until I hear otherwise. We followed him out into the yard. Past stripped shells. Past doors leaning against fences. Past engines sitting on pallets like discarded organs. Then I saw it. My Nova, or what was left of it. The hood was open, but there was nothing underneath. Just empty space where the 350 small block had been. Wires hanging loose. Cut. Not disconnected. Cut. The transmission tunnel was empty. The wheels were gone, replaced with mismatched junk tires just so they could move it around. The glove box was cracked open. Papers scattered across the seats. I walked up slowly. Reached out. Touched the fender. The same line I had spent hours sanding smooth. The same curve I had stood back and admired more times than I could count. And now, it felt like touching something that had been hollowed out. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there, because grief like that doesn't explode. It settles. Dale came up beside me. Didn't say anything for a while. Then, we built it once, he said quietly. We can build it again. I nodded. But something inside me had shifted. Because this wasn't just about rebuilding anymore. This was about accountability. We drove straight to the police station. I filed the report. The officer took everything down. The forged signature. The sale. The missing engine and wheels. The family details. All of it. Then she looked at me. I need to be upfront with you, she said. This may start as a civil matter. My chest tightened. She forged my signature. That's what gives us criminal jurisdiction, she said. But proving that takes time. Handwriting analysis isn't instant. Time. Everything was time. How do I protect what's left? I asked. You pursue both, she said. Criminal and civil, at the same time. I left with a case number, a detective's name, and no guarantees. Back at Hawthorne, I gave the man, Carl, the case number. He wrote it down. I'll verify Monday, he said. Until then, it stays. That was enough, for now. Dale and I stood by the Nova one more time before leaving. I ran my hand along the side again. Different this time. Not grieving, remembering, cataloging. Every bolt, every piece, every hour. Because if she thought this was over, If she thought she had erased 11 years with one decision, she didn't understand something very important. I wasn't like her. I didn't build things for show. I built them to last. And if I had to, I would rebuild everything, and then make sure she paid for every single part she destroyed. The next few weeks were paperwork, phone calls, controlled anger. The detective confirmed the case with Carl that Monday. The hold stayed. The Nova shell was released to me as part of the investigation. Dale and I towed it back to his garage, set it on jack stands, and assessed the damage. Body still straight. Interior mostly intact. Everything else, gone. Set back years. My parents called 3 days later. My mother was crying. "Brielle, please, this will ruin her career." I closed my eyes. She stole my car. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was upset. "She arranged a tow truck," I said flatly. "She took the title. She signed documents. She took money. That's not confusion. That's a plan." "She felt attacked," Mom whispered. "You embarrassed her in front of Grant's family." "I embarrassed her," I repeated. "So she committed a crime?" "She made a mistake." "Mistakes are forgetting a bill," I cut in, "not forging signatures." Silence. Then, "You're tearing this family apart." I let that sit, then answered, No, she did." Dad called later, angry, accusing. Said I was vindictive, petty, destroying her life over a pile of metal. "You watched her take it," I said. "You didn't call me. You didn't stop her." He didn't have an answer, so he hung up. That was the last normal conversation we ever had. I filed the civil suit the next day. Every part, every receipt, every recoverable cost. The engine, the transmission, the suspension, the interior, the labor, estimated through real shop quotes, the damage, the recovery, everything. The total came out just under $19,000. And that was before the criminal case even finished. A week later, I tracked down the man who bought my engine. Car guy. Like Dale. I showed him the report. Explained everything. He didn't argue. Sold it back to me for what he paid plus $100. It hurt, but it was one piece reclaimed. The wheels were gone. Already mounted on someone else's project. Those I'd have to replace. 3 weeks after filing the report, the detective called. "The handwriting analysis came back," she said. "I already knew." "They don't match," she confirmed. "Not even close." Forgery. Proven. Savannah wasn't just in trouble now. She was charged. Felony theft. Felony forgery. And for the first time since I walked into that empty garage, I felt something settle. Not relief. Not yet. But direction. Because this wasn't just my word anymore. This wasn't family drama. This was evidence. And evidence doesn't care about appearances. It just tells the truth. Every bolt accounted for. The legal process didn't explode. It didn't deliver some dramatic courtroom moment where everything collapsed in a single afternoon. It dragged. Slow. Methodical. Unforgiving. Which in the end was worse for Savannah. Because there was no clean break. No quick resolution. Just months of consequences stacking on top of each other until there was nothing left for her to stand on. The handwriting analysis destroyed her defense before it ever really started. Her lawyer tried anyway. Claimed I had given verbal permission. Claimed the signature was mine. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But evidence doesn't bend for narratives. The letter formations didn't match. The pressure patterns didn't match. It wasn't even a close imitation. Amateur. Rushed. Careless. Exactly like the decision that led her there. She ended up pleading down to misdemeanor theft to avoid the risk of felony convictions. It didn't save her the way she thought it would. A conviction is a conviction, especially in pharmaceutical sales. Trust is the entire job. Doctors don't work with people who've been caught forging documents and stealing from their own family. Her company placed her on administrative leave first, then quietly let her go. No announcement. No dramatic firing. Just gone. The civil case hit harder, because that one didn't care about intent, only impact. My lawyer had built it clean. Every receipt, every part, every estimate, every dollar tied to something real and defensible. The judge didn't hesitate. Full award, $19,000, plus legal fees, plus court costs. Savannah didn't have that kind of money. Of course she didn't. Her entire life had been built on the appearance of wealth, not the reality of it. Nice apartment, leased Lexus, designer clothes, expensive hair, everything optimized for how it looked, not how it held up when something real demanded payment. So the judgment did what reality always does eventually. It stripped the performance. The Lexus was the first thing to go, sold off to cover part of the judgment, replaced with a used Civic with over 100,000 miles. I won't lie. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. Then the apartment. Lease broken. Moved into something smaller, cheaper, further away from the image she had spent years constructing. Furniture started disappearing. listings popping up online, clothes, decor, anything she could convert into cash. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. It was a slow dismantling of a life that had never been as stable as it looked. And then came the part she never saw coming. Grant's family found out. Not from her. From the kind of quiet network people like them exist in, where reputation moves faster than truth. Where someone always knows someone who knows something. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. By the time Savannah tried to explain it, it didn't matter. Grant's mother had already decided. Concerns about compatibility. Questions about values. Timing. All the polite phrases people use when they've already made a decision and just need language that sounds civilized. Wedding planning stalled, then stopped. Deposits sat untouched. Contracts unsigned. Everything paused under the weight of a single, simple reality. Savannah wasn't who she said she was. And in their world, that mattered more than anything. Grant didn't fight for her. Of course he didn't. He handled it the way people like him are trained to handle inconvenience. He faded. Slower responses. Missed calls. Busy schedules. Until eventually, nothing. No confrontation. No closure. Just absence. The engagement didn't end with a conversation. It ended with silence. My parents took that hit too. They had co-signed on multiple wedding deposits trying to keep up with the Whitmores, trying to look like equals. They lost nearly $9,000 when everything collapsed. Money they didn't have. Money they had never really had. Dad picked up a weekend job at an auto parts store just to keep up with the credit card payments. They never blamed Savannah. Not really. They blamed me. Quietly. Then openly. I was vindictive. I was cold. I had taken it too far. As if there was a reasonable version of responding to theft and fraud. As if there was a version where I protected her image instead of my own life. Dale kept me steady through all of it. Every time I wanted to call her, unload everything, he stopped me. You're already winning, he'd say. Don't give them anything to twist. So I didn't. I stayed quiet. Let the system do its job. Let consequences land exactly where they were supposed to. And they did. The Nova took 8 months to rebuild. Again. We worked every Saturday. Sometimes Sundays. Same as before. Only this time, there was no illusion left. No idea that family would protect it. No assumption that anything I built would be safe just because it mattered to me. We moved faster. Because we knew more. Which bolts would fight us? Which steps couldn't be skipped? Which parts had to be done right the first time? I found replacement rally wheels at an estate sale after a 3-hour drive. Not the same set, but close enough. The engine went back in during a cold January morning. Dale guiding it into place with the hoist, bolting it down, reconnecting everything piece by piece. We rebuilt the transmission while we had it out, because we weren't doing this a third time. New wiring, because the old harness had been cut. New exhaust headers, because the scrapyard hadn't bothered to remove anything properly. Every piece that went back into that car meant something more than before, because now it wasn't just built, it was rebuilt. Twice earned. Savannah's payments came in slowly. Wage garnishments, court-ordered plans, overtime with fees and interest. It came out to almost $23,000. Her credit was destroyed. Her career was over. Last I heard, she was working in a medical supply warehouse, making a fraction of what she used to. My parents never apologized. Not once. My mother sent guilt texts on holidays. My father stopped speaking to me entirely. I blocked both of them after Thanksgiving. After my mother tried to corner me at Dale's dinner table and talk about forgiveness. Dale asked her to leave. She cried the whole way out. I felt nothing, and that used to scare me. The idea that I could feel nothing toward my own family. Now, it feels like clarity. Last Saturday, I drove the Nova. For real. First time since everything. Dale rode shotgun. Window down. Arm resting on the door. We took the back roads south of the city. The engine pulled clean. Strong. That deep, steady V8 sound rolling out across open road and empty fields. The suspension held tight over cracked pavement. Everything felt right. Not perfect. Not untouched. But right. Dale listened for a while, then nodded once. Sounds right. I smiled. Yeah. We drove for another hour. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. When we got back, I pulled into his garage, parked the Nova next to his old truck, killed the engine. Sat there for a second, hands on the wheel, feeling the quiet settle. Dale tossed me a rag. Same time next week? I nodded. Same time. I got back into my Corolla after. Drove home. Left the Nova there. Safe. Where nobody could touch it. Rebuilt. Every bolt accounted for. Every loss paid back. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what Savannah had taken. I was thinking about what she hadn't been able to destroy. Because no matter how hard she tried, she never understood the difference between something that looks valuable and something that actually is